Today's exchange between Congressman Ted Lieu and Secretary Rubio was more than a heated political moment. It was a fundamental confrontation over the rule of law and the limits of executive power.
You believe the administration has to follow that Supreme Court order?
Well, I don't believe he was wrongfully deported. He's an Salvadorian citizen.
That's not my question. Do you believe that Trump administration has to follow the Supreme Court 9-0 unanimous decision?
Within the context of separation of powers.
Okay.
No court can tell me how to conduct foreign policy. They can't tell me what I have to say to a president of another country, nor do I need to tell them what I told the president of another country, because I can't conduct foreign policy.
I'm just asking you, do you believe that Trump administration has to follow the unanimous Supreme Court? Secretary Rubio, thank you for being here today. As a member of the legislative branch, I don't have a special exemption to violate the law. You would agree with me, wouldn't you, that in America, no one is above the law?
Of course.
Okay. And in our system of government, it's Congress that makes the laws, the executive branch that executes the laws, and the judicial branch, when there's a dispute, that says what the law is. Is that right?
Within the context of separation of powers, yes.
Okay. And the reason that due process is so fundamental to America is before we put the entire weight of the federal government and snatch someone off the street, we might want to ask, hey, do you have something to say about that? Might we have the wrong person? And in the case of Mr. Garcia, the Trump administration admitted in court that they mistakenly deported him to El Salvador. The Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, said the Trump administration has to facilitate getting him back. Do you believe the administration has to follow that Supreme Court order?
Well, I don't believe he was wrongfully deported. He's an Salvadorian citizen.
That's not my question. Do you believe that Trump administration has to follow the Supreme Court 9-0 unanimous decision?
Within the context of separation of powers.
Okay.
No court can tell me how to conduct foreign policy. They can't tell me what I have to say to a president of another country, nor do I need to tell them what I told the president of another country, because I can't conduct foreign policy.
I'm just asking you, do you believe that Trump administration has to follow the unanimous Supreme Court decision?
I believe we are following it.
Okay, so my next question is, what steps have you or the State Department taken to facilitate the return of Mr. Garcia, who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
The conduct of our foreign policy is an executive function, and how I conduct it, I don't need to share with you.
Well, let me ask you
share with the court.
Have you or the State Department taken any steps to facilitate?
We've taken steps, but I'm not going to tell you what they are, and I don't have to, because we conduct the foreign policy of the United States, and I can't conduct diplomacy with a foreign leader if I come to committees and tell you what they said to me, what I said to them, and more certainly a court can't tell me to say that.
You have taken steps to facilitate Mr. Garcia's return.
We've made those. We've made that assertion, and we've made those assertions in court, and we've
thank
complied.
you. I appreciate that. I'd like to ask you now about Ukraine. On August 24, 2022, you tweeted the following. In the past 6 months since Putin's criminal invasion of Ukraine, Ukrainians have shown incredible bravery and strength as they fight to defend their homeland. On Ukraine's Independence Day, the free world applauds their courage and celebrates Ukraine's sovereignty. And then also in 2022, you said the people of Ukraine are tough people who will never accept being ruled by Putin. I want to ask you, I assume you continue to believe what you said in 2022, right? That we should celebrate Ukraine's sovereignty and that the people of Ukraine will never accept being ruled by Putin, right?
Yeah, that's why we're trying to end the war.
All right. On April 30th, 2018, you tweeted, "Glad to see State Department confirm delivery of Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. The U.S. should continue empowering Ukraine and other allies to defend against the threat of Russian aggression." You would agree with your prior statement that the U.S. should continue to support Ukraine against Russian aggression, right?
We've supported them more than anyone in the world.
All right. Unfortunately, it appears Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth went rogue and decided unilaterally to stop support for Ukraine earlier this year. Various news organizations reported that Secretary Hegseth paused military support to Ukraine without President Trump's knowledge. I'm going to read you from one article dated May 6. Quote, Pete Hegseth canceled military aid flights to Ukraine just a week into Trump's second term without the president even knowing, according to Reuters. The order initially sparked mass confusion within the administration as national security officials in the White House, the Pentagon, and the State Department couldn't figure out who ordered the halt in flights. This is yet another example of the chaos and lack of cohesion that Hegseth has brought to the Pentagon from day one. Did Secretary Hegseth tell you before he ordered the halt in flights to Ukraine of military weapons?
I can't comment on that because I don't remember that. I don't remember ever hearing that, what you're claiming now.
So your understanding is he never told you he was going to halt these flights?
I just know we're providing them assistance now, but the war ultimately has to end.
In 2016, you stated the following: from his repression of the Russian people and the assassination of his critics, to his dangerous invasion of Ukraine and the occupation of Crimea, to his threats against our NATO allies in Central and Eastern Europe, to the war crimes committed by Russian forces, Putin's Russia is a threat to global stability. You would agree with your prior statement, right, that Putin's Russia is a threat to global stability?
I would agree that in my role as Secretary of State, my job is to bring Russia to the table to end the war, and that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to end the war so that more people don't die.
Thank you. And trying to end the war, I simply note that Putin on Palm Sunday launched a barrage of missiles, killed a bunch of civilians. Right before his conversation with Trump recently, he launched a bunch of missiles, killed a bunch of civilians. So clearly, Putin is giving the middle finger to you and to the president. I urge you to defeat Putin on the battlefield. That's the only way to get him to the negotiating table. I yield back.
Ted Lieu didn't come in just to spar. He came in to remind the country that the Constitution's separation of powers is not a suggestion. It's the backbone of how this nation works. His questioning began with simple civics. Congress makes the laws, the executive enforces them, and the judiciary interprets them. But that simple question carried enormous weight because it exposed what happens when the executive branch decides it can ignore a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling. At the center of this dispute is Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man deported under the Trump administration despite a legal order that should have protected him. The Supreme Court, in a rare unanimous decision, ruled that the government had violated due process and must facilitate Garcia's return to the U.S. Yet Secretary Rubio, in this hearing, seemed to argue that the administration doesn't have to follow that ruling if it interferes with their foreign policy. That's not just troubling, it's a constitutional crisis in miniature. Because if the executive branch can ignore the Supreme Court whenever it's inconvenient, then judicial authority means nothing. That's the quiet danger Ted Lieu was highlighting, one that goes beyond partisanship. It cuts to the very principle of checks and balances. Lieu's persistence, asking the same question multiple times, wasn't just for drama, it was strategic. He wanted Rubio to say, clearly, whether the administration believes it must comply with the Supreme Court. And instead of a yes, Rubio dodged, deflected, and hid behind foreign policy. That's what made this exchange so powerful. It showed the tension between democracy and executive overreach in real time. But then the conversation took an unexpected turn. Ted Lieu pivoted to Ukraine. And that shift wasn't random, it was intentional. Because what's at stake here isn't just one deportation case. It's about America's moral consistency on the global stage. How can we preach about rule of law abroad, in places like Ukraine, if our own administration is undermining it at home? Lieu's reminder of Rubio's past tweets supporting Ukrainian sovereignty and condemning Putin was a masterstroke. He essentially asked, how can we stand up for democracy overseas if we ignore it domestically? That contrast exposed the hypocrisy of leaders who talk about freedom but bend constitutional principles when it suits their political goals. Rubio's responses were evasive, mechanical, and heavily filtered through bureaucratic language, the kind that tries to justify silence with diplomacy. But Lieu's persistence humanized the issue. He wasn't fighting for Garcia as a person so much as for what Garcia's case represents, the right of every individual, citizen or not, to fair treatment under the law. That's what separates democracy from authoritarianism. This wasn't just another D.C. argument. This was a lesson in constitutional ethics, a reminder that due process is not optional, and that power, no matter who wields it, must always be accountable. When Lieu says no one is above the law, he's echoing a truth that every American should hold sacred, especially in moments when political convenience tempts leaders to forget it. And on Ukraine, Lieu made it clear that America's strength abroad depends on our integrity at home. You can't credibly challenge Putin's lawlessness if you're ignoring Supreme Court rulings here. That's the bigger picture, and it's what gives this moment its historic weight. So, as viewers, we shouldn't just see this as a partisan clash. We should see it as a wake-up call about what's at stake when the rule of law is treated like a political opinion instead of a national principle. If you value truth, accountability, and democracy, make sure to subscribe, because we'll keep breaking down moments like this, the ones that reveal not just political theater, but the deeper battles shaping America's future.